I never thought I'd be the guy writing here. Honestly, I always skimmed these posts thinking, man, how do people let their relationships get so messy? But here I am. I guess no one really thinks it'll happen to them until it does. I've been married for almost 8 years. My wife, let's call her Rachel, was the kind of person who could light up a room. At least that's what I thought back when we were dating. She was funny, charming, and had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. I mistook that for warmth. Now I'm realizing it was more like manipulation. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Little lies that didn't add up. Like, she'd say she was working late, but somehow her Instagram story would show her grabbing drinks with the girls. Or she'd tell me she was too tired for date night, but then stay up on FaceTime with her cousin until 2 a.m. I wanted to believe the best in her, so I ignored those gut feelings. I told myself, she works hard. She deserves to unwind. Don't be controlling. But those gut feelings? They were the quiet warnings I should have listened to. Because soon enough, the cracks weren't just cracks anymore. They were full-on fractures I couldn't ignore. And the irony? Around this same time, I was reading the life of Nelson Mandela for my English practice group. Strange combo, right? Me studying perseverance and forgiveness, while my wife was busy rewriting the definition of betrayal right in my own house. I'll admit, the shock of it all hit me harder than I expected. I felt blindsided, like the ground under my feet wasn't solid anymore. That was the start. And honestly, it only got worse from there. So here's where things really started unraveling. Rachel told me she had to go out of town for a work retreat. 3 days, company paid, lots of boring team-building stuff. Her words, not mine. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, people have work trips all the time, right? But then, the red flags started waving. For one, she packed way too much for what was supposed to be a casual work event. Dresses, heels, even that perfume she only ever wears when she's trying to impress someone. When I teased her about it, she laughed it off, saying, "You don't know how competitive women can be at these things. I have to look sharp." Okay, fair enough, I thought. But then, on the second night of her retreat, I get a call from a buddy of mine who works in the same industry. He casually mentions that their company doesn't even do retreats this time of year. My stomach dropped. I checked her Instagram, nothing posted. I texted her. She replied hours later with a grainy photo of some conference room. Something about it just looked off. When she got back, I asked her about it directly. She didn't even flinch, just rolled her eyes and said I was being paranoid. She claimed the retreat was for upper management only, and that's why my buddy didn't know about it. I wanted to believe her, but the more she talked, the more I noticed how her story shifted slightly every time. That was the first time I really felt that cold pit in my stomach, the one that whispers, "She's lying to you." But instead of confronting it fully, I swallowed it down. I told myself I was overthinking. I distracted myself by diving back into Mandela's biography. Funny how his prison years felt less suffocating than my own house did at that moment. Looking back now, that trip was the beginning of the end. All right. So after that so-called retreat, things between Rachel and me were tense. I didn't outright accuse her, but my trust was shaken. I watched her more closely, not in a controlling way, but in a my wife might be a liar way. And then it happened, the slip-up. One night, she said she was heading to the gym. No big deal, right? Except when she left, she took her nice purse with her. Who brings a designer bag to the gym? I brushed it off until about an hour later, when I realized she forgot her water bottle. I figured I'd be a good husband, swing by the gym, and drop it off. Except she wasn't there. I checked the parking lot. Her car wasn't there either. My chest got tight. I drove around like a lunatic until I spotted her car parked outside this trendy little restaurant downtown. Through the window, clear as day, I saw her sitting across from some guy in a suit. They weren't just chatting. He leaned across the table, touched her hand, and she laughed in that flirty, girlish way she used to laugh with me. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes, just staring, my head spinning. Part of me wanted to storm inside and make a scene. Another part of me wanted to drive away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. In the end, I snapped a picture with my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. When she came home later, smelling like wine and excuses, I asked her about the gym. Without missing a beat, she told me she had stayed late because she was helping a friend with their workout. I just stared at her. She didn't know I'd seen her. She didn't know I had proof. And in that moment, I realized something brutal. She was way too comfortable lying to my face. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, her soft snoring next to me like nothing had happened. My brain kept replaying the image of her hand under that guy's. I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The next morning, I waited until she was sipping her coffee. I pulled out my phone, opened the picture, and slid it across the table. "Is this the gym?" I asked. Her face drained of color for half a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Then, like flipping a switch, she put on her act. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "Wow, really? You're stalking me now?" I told her not to dodge. "Who was he? Why lie?" She sighed dramatically, like I was the problem here, and said it was just a business dinner. According to her, this guy was a client she didn't want to mention because I'd get jealous. The sheer arrogance of that excuse made me laugh. I said, "You told me you were at the gym. Since when does Planet Fitness serve wine?" She doubled down. "I didn't want to deal with your insecurity, okay? That's why I said gym." I can't explain the cocktail of emotions I felt. Anger, betrayal, sadness. But what stuck out most was the calm way she lied. She didn't stumble over her words. She didn't even look nervous. It was like lying was her second language. The worst part? A tiny part of me wanted to believe her. Wanted to cling to the idea that maybe I'd misunderstood. That's how deep I was hooked. But deep down I knew. Something in me shifted that morning. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. So after the whole business dinner lie, I couldn't shake it. My gut screamed that she was feeding me garbage. And if I've learned anything from this, it's that your gut is rarely wrong. A couple days later, while Rachel was showering, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I know, snooping is wrong. But at this point, she'd lied straight to my face about the gym, so I figured the moral high ground was already burned to the ground. The text was from Mark, client. Cute. Except this client was sending her messages like, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped. I scrolled further. There were weeks of texts, flirty jokes, dinner plans, even selfies. And not the innocent kind. The kicker? This dude wasn't a client at all. I Googled his name and found out he worked at some consulting firm across town. No business connection to her company whatsoever. Just some guy she'd been sneaking around with while telling me fairy tales about work. When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, humming like nothing was wrong, I couldn't hold it in. I held up the phone and said, "So how's Mark the client doing?" Her face froze. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback ready. She just stood there, dripping water on the carpet, staring at me like I'd caught her with blood on her hands. Finally, she snapped. "You had no right to go through my phone." No denial. No explanation. Just flipping the blame on me. That was the moment the denial inside me finally died. She wasn't confused. She wasn't sorry. She was just pissed that she got caught. So after I dropped the Mark bomb on her, I expected, at the very least, a meltdown, maybe some begging, some, "I'm sorry, I screwed up." But nope. Rachel went straight into damage control with a twist. Make me the villain. She crossed her arms, tilted her head like I was a naughty child, and said, "You know, if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to spying, maybe I wouldn't need to talk to someone else." I just stood there floored. She had just been caught red-handed, and her first instinct was to weaponize my love for her into a character flaw. Then she really laid it on. "You're boring now. You've let yourself go. Mark actually listens to me, unlike you." Each line hit me like a brick, not because they were true, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. At one point, she even tried pulling the Nelson Mandela card. I kid you not. She goes, "Didn't you say that book you're reading is about forgiveness? Maybe you should practice what you preach." I laughed. Actually laughed in her face. I told her Mandela spent decades in prison for a cause bigger than himself. Meanwhile, she couldn't even make it through a marriage without playing Tinder in real life. But here's the thing. As cruel and manipulative as her words were, a small, insecure part of me wondered, was I really the problem? Did I push her to this? That's how effective her guilt tripping was. It took everything in me not to collapse into that self-doubt. Instead, I told her I needed space and left the house. I drove around for hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. That night, I realized this wasn't just about cheating. This was about control, manipulation, and the fact that my wife was a world-class liar who knew exactly how to twist the knife. So after that disaster of a confrontation, I started noticing something. Rachel wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to pretty much everyone. A week later, we went to a small get-together at my buddy's house. You know, casual food, drinks, board games. At one point, someone asked Rachel how her big work retreat went. Without hesitation, she launched into this elaborate story about icebreakers, group presentations, and even a trust fall exercise. Everyone was nodding along, but I was sitting there, knowing every word was bull. Here's the kicker. My buddy's wife works in the same field. She raised an eyebrow and said, "Wait, your company does retreats in March? That's odd. Ours always line up, and we didn't have one this year." Rachel froze for just a second, then smoothly shifted gears. "Oh, it was actually more like an informal workshop, not a full retreat." She laughed it off, and people seemed to buy it. But I caught that quick flash of panic in her eyes. It happened again at dinner with her mom. Rachel was going on about some late nights at the office. Her mom, sweet lady but sharp as a tack, asked, "Since when do you work in that building? Didn't they move last year?" Rachel stammered, then changed the subject so fast it was almost comical. That's when it hit me. Her web of lies wasn't sustainable. She was juggling too many stories, too many details. And sooner or later, she was going to drop something big. Honestly, I felt two things in that moment. Vindication, because I wasn't crazy. Dread, because if she was willing to lie so easily in front of everyone else, there was no telling how deep the rabbit hole went. I started keeping mental notes of every inconsistency, every contradiction. It was like living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. The collapse came faster than I expected. One Saturday, Rachel said she was heading to a networking brunch. At this point, I didn't even bother questioning it out loud. I just nodded and let her go. But deep down, I had that gnawing gut feeling again. A few hours later, I get a call from her sister. Totally casual, just asking if Rachel and I wanted to come by later to hang out. I said, "She's busy with her networking thing." And her sister goes, "Networking? That's weird." She just texted me saying she's spending the afternoon cleaning the house. My blood ran cold. Two completely different lies told within minutes of each other. I asked her sister to forward me the text, and sure enough, Rachel had told her she was home scrubbing floors. Meanwhile, I knew she was out playing dress-up with business brunch as the cover story. I decided to wait. About 5 hours later, Rachel walked in, all smiles, carrying a little shopping bag. No brunch, no cleaning supplies, just a new dress. I asked her how the brunch went. She launched into this long story about meeting some amazing women in the industry, swapping contacts, blah blah blah. Then, mid-sentence, I said, "Funny. Your sister told me you spent the day cleaning." The look on her face? Priceless. She stammered, tried to backpedal, then got defensive. "Why are you checking up on me? Why are you calling my family behind my back?" And that was it. Her whole mask cracked. She couldn't keep the lie straight anymore. She went from calm and smug to angry and desperate in seconds. For the first time, I wasn't even mad. I just sat there, almost detached, watching her unravel. It was like seeing the magician's trick exposed. You can never be fooled the same way again. That night, I realized the Rachel I thought I married didn't exist. She was a character she'd been playing all along. After the brunch cleaning disaster, something inside me finally flipped. I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped hoping she'd come clean. Instead, I started planning my escape. The key was not letting Rachel know. Because if there's one thing I'd learned about her, it's that she hated losing control. So I played along, smiled at dinner, nodded during her endless excuses, even pretended to believe her little stories. Meanwhile, I was quietly getting my ducks in a row. First step, finances. I opened a separate checking account and started funneling small amounts of money into it. Nothing noticeable, just enough to give me breathing room when the time came. Second step, documents. Birth certificate, passport, social security card. I gathered everything quietly and stashed them at my brother's house. I didn't trust Rachel not to pull something dramatic if things blew up. Third step, evidence. I saved screenshots of her texts, her lies, even the picture of her with Mark the not-so-client. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew she'd try to spin the story if it came down to divorce. All the while, She was prancing around the house like she was untouchable. She'd smile at me with that smug look, kiss me goodnight like nothing was wrong, and every time she did, I thought, if only you knew. It was strange. I felt calmer than I had in months. Like once I accepted who she really was, the fog lifted. I wasn't stuck in her lies anymore. I was just waiting. And part of me almost enjoyed watching her trip over her own stories, knowing the end game was already in motion. The opportunity came out of nowhere. Rachel had dragged me to one of her work events, a dinner party at a fancy restaurant. She loved these things because they gave her a stage. And, of course, she launched right into one of her perfect wife monologues about her career, her amazing husband, and how balanced her life was. It was nauseating. But then karma tapped her on the shoulder. One of her coworkers asked, "So Rachel, how was that client retreat in March? I heard it was canceled this year because of budget cuts." The table went silent. My eyes snapped up from my drink. Rachel froze, then laughed way too loud. "Oh, I was talking about a different retreat. You must have misunderstood." But the coworker didn't let it go. He frowned and said, "We're on the same project team, Rachel. If there was another retreat, I definitely would have known about it." Boom. Right there, in front of a whole table of people, her story collapsed. She stumbled through some half-baked excuse about subdivisions of management, but no one looked convinced. The air was thick with awkwardness. I just sat back and watched. For the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed for her. I felt vindicated. Everyone was seeing the cracks I'd been living with for months. On the drive home, she exploded. "Why didn't you back me up? You made me look like a fool." I calmly told her, "You don't need me to make you look like a fool. You're doing that all by yourself." She screamed, slammed the dashboard, called me unsupportive. But I didn't bite. I stayed quiet, because I already knew this was the beginning of the end, and I had everything I needed to walk away. A few days after the restaurant disaster, I decided it was time. No more waiting, no more pretending. I had spent months preparing, and now it was all about execution. I started with the essentials, telling a few close friends and my brother about what was really going on. Not because I wanted gossip, but because I needed support in case Rachel went nuclear. Their reactions were the mix of shock and disbelief I expected. "She can't be that manipulative," one friend said. Yes, she was. Then came the confrontation. I sat her down in the living room, kept my tone calm but firm. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just laid it out. Every lie, every manipulation, every contradiction I had documented. I watched her face go from smirk to disbelief to anger. She tried to twist it around. "You're overreacting." I was just trying to keep things interesting. I didn't flinch. I said, "No, Rachel, you've been dishonest with me and everyone else. I can't live like this anymore. I'm done." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She tried crying, pleading, even threatening. But I stayed silent, collected, unshaken. The next day, I moved my essentials out while she was at work. Passport, bank statements, clothes, everything I needed to be independent. No drama, no confrontation, just a clean, deliberate exit. And in that quiet moment, when I locked the door behind me for the last time, I felt relief. True relief. The first few weeks after leaving were brutal, emotionally. I didn't expect relief to be mixed with grief. Part of me kept thinking, was I too harsh? Did I miss something? Could I have fixed it? But every time I remembered her lies, her manipulations, the way she gaslit me into doubting my own instincts, the doubts evaporated. Friends tried to console me, but some avoided me too, probably afraid of picking sides or getting dragged into drama. Work was awkward at first. Small talk felt heavy. Even simple routines like grocery shopping triggered flashes of anger when I thought of her smug little grin or those over-the-top excuses she used to cover her tracks. Then came the surprise, a message from her. Short, abrupt. "You'll regret this. I hope you rot alone." I laughed. For the first time, I genuinely laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. That was all the control she had left. Empty threats. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I let it go. Bit by bit, I rebuilt my life. I reconnected with friends I'd ignored during the chaos. I started investing in myself again, hobbies, career goals, personal health. Every little step reminded me that freedom felt good, real good. And somewhere in the background of all that chaos, I realized something important. Losing her didn't feel like losing a partner. It felt like escaping a prison I hadn't fully understood I was in. With time, the anger faded, leaving behind clarity. I started seeing everything through a different lens, not just the lies, but the way I'd let myself get caught up in them. First lesson, trust your instincts. I had ignored every gut feeling that something was off because I wanted to believe in the perfect marriage. Big mistake. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Second lesson, boundaries matter. I'd allowed Rachel to manipulate situations because I didn't want conflict. That only gave her power. Now, I knew standing firm on your boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Third lesson, self-respect is everything. No one, no matter how convincing or charming, should make you doubt your own worth. She tried, in her own twisted way, to chip away at mine. Walking away was me reclaiming it. I also realized something bittersweet. Sometimes people reveal their true colors slowly, and that's not your fault. The shame, guilt, or embarrassment you feel, that's not yours to carry. It belongs to the person who deceived you. And strangely enough, the experience made me grateful. Grateful for clarity, for the strength I didn't know I had, and for the chance to rebuild a life that wasn't built on lies. Once word got out, quietly, through friends or social media, people started reacting. Some were shocked, some curious, and a few were judgmental. Family was divided. My brother and closest friends were solid. They had seen the signs I hadn't wanted to admit. Others, not so much. Some distant relatives whispered about me, overreacting, or not trying hard enough. Funny thing is, those whispers barely fazed me anymore. Even strangers noticed the change. At work, people commented on my new confidence or fresh energy. It was wild to see how shedding one toxic relationship could ripple into every corner of your life. And the most unexpected part? Some of Rachel's former friends reached out to apologize, or at least to confirm they had seen her manipulations too. That validation was small, but meaningful. It wasn't revenge, it was closure. Through it all, I realized something. The world doesn't end when a relationship fails, especially when it fails because the other person isn't who you thought they were. What matters is how you carry yourself afterward. By the end of this chapter, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had clarity, independence, and a renewed sense of self-worth that no lie could touch. Looking back now, I see the whole mess with Rachel as a brutal but necessary lesson. It hurt like hell at the time, but it taught me things I wouldn't have learned any other way. First, trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Second, set boundaries early and enforce them. Your peace of mind is worth more than anyone's temporary approval. Third, never lose sight of your self-respect. If someone consistently erodes it, leaving might be the bravest and smartest move you can make. And here's the hardest truth. Not everyone you love will treat you right. Some people are manipulative, some are selfish, some are just toxic. It doesn't matter how much you care about them. Caring alone can't fix a relationship built on lies. But there's hope. Walking away gave me freedom, clarity, and a chance to rebuild life on my terms. Life feels lighter, brighter, and more honest now. I'm happier, stronger, and ready to trust again, carefully, wisely. So if you're reading this and feeling trapped in a relationship full of lies and manipulation, take it from me. You don't have to endure it. Trust yourself, plan your exit, and don't look back until you're ready. The freedom and peace on the other side are worth every step. And yeah, sometimes the end of one story is really just the start of a much better one.